Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H virtual event space. You are tuned in to future-proofing your photo collection, part of Save Your Photos Month with the photo managers. They've been here all month. And for that, I'd like to introduce the wonderful Kathy Nelson. Kathy, how's it going?
Good, great, Derek. Thanks so much. Glad to be back.
Glad to have you on. Another day of matching here at the event space. Kathy's sweatshirt has gotten the memo that purple has been the color of the day lately. So just want to call that out there. But Kathy, as always, you bring us wonderful guests. So I'll let you do the introducing here. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks. Yeah. Excited to, again, Save Your Photos Month is the month of September. We're coming up at the end, but we will have free content for you and classes you can watch through the end of October, and then we wait until next year. But this is a great guest today, Rachel Arbuckle, who really, the whole concept of Save Your Photos Month, she built her business in a way of out of a result of fires in San Diego, right? Rachel, I don't know how much you'll get into that, but she is a very successful professional photo manager with a great team, helping people rescue their photos from clients, I think, all over the United States. And so Rachel will take you through her presentation right now. So thanks, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Appreciate it. Very happy to be here. I'm going to jump right in because I hope you're all excited to learn about how we can future-proof your photos. And let me get my screen up. There we go. All right, hopefully you can all see that. As Kathy said, my name is Rachel Arbuckle, and I'm the founder and CEO of 2000 Paces Photo Organizing. I'm going to talk a little bit about that before we dive into the meat of everything. All right, so I always like to make sure we have a plan. So the plan today is I'm going to just tell you a little bit about myself and how I became an expert in the photo organizing industry and how I even decided to enter into this industry. What is future proofing your photos? What does that even mean? And why do we need to do it? We're going to kind of take a little dive into that. Most of our time is going to be spent talking about the various strategies that you can employ to future-proof your photos. So I'm going to give you some actual strategies and a plan. So make sure you have your notepad and pen ready to go. And then I'm just going to touch on a brief overview of organizing your photos for those of you that are interested in making that happen. So let me talk to you a little bit about us and who I am. So the creation of 2000 Paces Photo Organizing was truly sparked by a fire. In fact, this photo is near my home in San Diego. This happens to be Cal State San Marcos University. The fire was so intense that it really ripped through our neighborhood, and we only had minutes to get out. Now, living in San Diego for quite a few years, it's not uncommon to experience evacuation and fires, but this one was particularly intense. And as I stood at the bottom of the hill taking this photo, all I could think about was all the photos that were left behind in our home. My grandfather's World War II memorabilia, my parents' childhood photos and their graduation certificates, my children's artwork and school photos. And they were all in frames and photo albums on various computers and drives and CDs all over the house waiting for me to get to it someday. I decided at that time that if our memories survived, and they did, unfortunately, unlike some in our community, but that I would commit to finding a solution. And at the time, I didn't find a solution that really matched what I thought our precious photo memories deserved. So I started a company to provide that solution. So oftentimes people ask, what is 2000 paces? What does that come from? So in ancient or biblical times, depending on your religious affiliation, 2000 paces represented a day's journey, particularly on the Sabbath day, but it's a day's journey. And what we're trying to do is capture our client's journey and preserve it for future generations. And that's why it's perfect that we're talking about this today. We do have an office. Our corporate office is here in San Diego. We have about 1,500 square feet of office space. We have a full team of professional and expert photo organizers that have been trained, but we actually work with clients all over the country. We've got clients in all four corners and everywhere in between, and we're honored to help them both with print photos, organizing digital photos, and converting those home movies. And I do want to share our mission because integrity and working genuinely is really important to me. So our mission is to provide authentic, compassionate solutions to transform the chaos of photos and memorabilia into an organized, preserved collection that can be easily shared and enjoyed for generations. Okay. So future-proof photos, what does that even mean? And I'm curious what people were thinking when they decided to take this on. What does that mean to future-proof my photos? So I've put together kind of a little definition for you of what I define as future-proofing your photos. And that is refers to taking steps to ensure that your digital or physical photos remain accessible and usable in the years and decades to come. So preservation of memories, we're going to talk just very briefly, why should I future-proof them? Why is that important? We know whether you're a photographer or somebody who just pulls out your phone and takes photos of your family or anything in between, photos capture those important moments and memories in our lives. And future-proofing them ensures they're preserved for you, for your family, for the future generations to enjoy and cherish and connect with that family history. Technology is changing. We see it every single day. And as technology advances, old file formats, storage media, some of these devices could become obsolete. Now, B&H does a great job of keeping us updated, and that's really important. But we want to kind of stay at the forefront as this evolution continues. And it's moving faster every day. So future-proofing helps you to adapt to these changes and ensures your photos can really be accessed as our technology changes. Preventing data loss. This is a big topic right now. And if you haven't read about it or heard about it or participated in a webinar, I'm sure you will soon. Hard drives can fail. Cloud services can change their policies. They can decide to close down. And of course, physical photos, whether they're in print, any of the slides, negatives, they do deteriorate over time, particularly if they're stored in albums or with chemicals that can hurt those photos. So by future-proofing, it really does minimize the risk of losing your photos due to that hardware failure, due to the data corruption, or some other unforeseen events. And when we jump into the strategies, hopefully it'll provide you some comfort when you think about data loss. And the last reason that I want to share for future-proofing your photos is simply wanting to share with friends and family or collaborate on projects if you're working on a project, whether that be a business project or marketing, or you're selling photos to a client. We want the ability to share, collaborate, download. And by future-proofing your photos, it makes it easier to share because you're using the latest tools and services. So let's jump into the heart of really what we want to talk about. And I've got, I think, 9 different strategies of how you can future-proof your photos. So this is when you want to grab your pen and notepad and take some notes. Number 1 is backup. You've heard it many times before with your documents, and that applies to your photos and videos and memorabilia as well. Regularly backing up your digital photos to multiple locations, such as an external hard drive or cloud-based storage, is critical. The redundancy really helps protect your photos from data loss, because obviously if one of your external hard drive breaks, or there's an issue with the manufacturing, you've got that backup somewhere else. Or if something happens with that cloud-based backup, you've got that external drive. So having multiple backups is really important, and I am going to touch on that a little bit later. Another strategy for future-proofing your photos is using standard file formats. That might be a surprise, but it's really a good practice to use those widely accepted standardized file formats like JPEG or TIFF. These formats have been around for a long time. They were really what initiated the digital assets and images for us, and they're likely to remain compatible with future software and devices. That doesn't mean that you can't save them as other formats, but it's a good rule of thumb to make sure that your precious photos are saved in one of those standard formats. Metadata. So for those of you that aren't familiar with metadata, it's data about data. So it's all that information on your photo, whether that has to do with the date it was taken, the type of device you were using, any of the keywords, copyright information, and adding metadata to your photos really can help future-proof them as our technology changes. So some examples include adding titles to your photos, captions where you can get some information from family members that can be passed on. Dates, of course, are critical. That EXIF date we've got in the metadata, let's make sure that we're capturing that in the right way. And keywords and facial recognition, although facial recognition is a part of keywords, I really do like that to kind of stand out, because that's where we can identify those people we're trying to find in the future. And particularly from a sort of family history or genealogical aspect, when we, years from now, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren might not know who different people are. And it's not the same as when we used to write people's names in albums or scrapbooks. And so making sure you add these keywords, adding the facial recognition is really going to help make sure these photos can be enjoyed in the future. And really, it makes it easier to search and organize as that collection grows. Your media storage solutions. So those of you that are all fans of B&H like I am know that they've got a plethora of storage solutions with which to choose, but it's really important that you do select something that is reliable and long lasting. Here I've said that SSDs are a really high quality external drive is a good option. I really do prefer the solid state drives. It's going to help prevent damage. They also move a lot quicker. I have dropped them before. And when that happens, I find the SSDs can survive a lot better than some of the more traditional drives. But it's important to keep in mind that you migrate your photos and videos and so forth as technology evolves. So just because today you have the right solution doesn't mean that next year you will. And so keeping up with that technology and making sure to update and migrate really is critical. Another strategy, of course, is simply reviewing periodically and updating your photo collection. And that could just be as simple as removing duplicates. You could be sitting at one of your child's sporting events, or waiting in line, or waiting for a show to start, and you can just get on your phone and start removing those duplicates. Removing the stuff that doesn't tell your story. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but that is a perfect time to go through all those memes and accidental screenshots when you're sitting waiting in line or something. Renaming files by date. That's really important if you have the technology to make that happen, or if you feel comfortable using software to make that happen, because that's simply going to keep all those photos organized and accessible. And it's something you can do really quite easily with your digital photos. And you might consider sorting them into folders, and that might be folders by year, by decade, or by event. Cloud storage, I'm going to take a deeper dive into. It's really the future-proofing is taking some time to choose the best online photo storage solution for your needs and the security that you need for those needs, and really finding that convenient way to manage those precious memories. So I'm going to go through a list of things that I recommend you look for when you are deciding what cloud storage you need. So the first is simply storage capacity. How much space do you need? Are you a professional photographer that takes photos in RAW and therefore uses up a lot of space? Or maybe you've got young children or grandchildren on the way. How much space do you actually need? Now, luckily, many of these services give you the option to increase that, but you want to make sure that those photos are protected right away. We have had clients who have, for example, on your iPhone and iCloud, they haven't purchased enough storage. They thought their photos were being backed up. They dropped their phone. Their photos were gone forever because they simply didn't acquire enough storage. So that's a really important component. Another feature that is really critical right now, of course, is security. When you're looking at a cloud storage, look for one that provides protection from unauthorized access and data breaches. Now, obviously, there's no certainties, but it's important to look for a couple features that will provide you some security and some comfort knowing that at least the company is taking some steps to make sure that your photos are protected. So that might be encrypting passwords. Do they offer encrypted passwords, two-factor authentication? And do they provide regular security updates? These are all indicators of an online storage site that is working hard to protect your photos. Privacy. Are you comfortable with the data usage and sharing practices? The fine print, sometimes in some of these online storage will say that they have a right to your photos. That could be various capacities. It could be that they have a right to use them. They have a right to access them. Regardless of what those are and what your comfort level is, it's really important to understand what those privacy policies are and whether or not you're comfortable accepting those. For some of you that might be great with technology, this might not be as much of an issue, but user-friendly interface and finding an online storage that doesn't require you to take an entire course on how to use it, I find is really beneficial. Is it easy to upload photos? Is it easy to share them? Is it easy to download them when you need them? Cross-platform compatibility. Can you access your photos across various devices and varying operating systems? You might be a Windows user right now, and in a year you decide to move to a Mac. Is that compatible with your online storage? Maybe you've got an iPhone right now with, iOS, and you decide to move to Android. Is there an app for that? Is there the opportunity to access those photos if you do change your device or operating system? File format support. This is a great one, particularly for photographers. Some online storage don't offer the ability to store raw files because they're simply take up so much storage. Or do you need to pay extra to store those raw files? That very well could be worth it, again, for photographers. But it's important that you understand what file formats are being supported. iPhone's got, the HEIC files. Can those be uploaded? Can those be saved in their current format? Or do you need to migrate those to another format before you upload them? Sharing options. Are you going to want to share entire albums with friends, family, colleagues, or clients? Maybe you want to share individual photos. Do you want to share them with specific people? Are you going to share them with groups? Because maybe you have a child who's on a volleyball team and you want to share all the photos, or you want to share them with clients, or you want others to share photos with you. Think about what your goal is. What's your motivation? How do you see yourself using this site, and determine if this is important for you? Backup and sync. This is pretty consistent across the board. It's really important if you want that automatic backup and sync feature from your phone, or if you're taking photos on your camera and you're using a memory card, will it auto update or back up and sync from your computer? These are all really important questions if you want that feature. If you're okay manually updating the photos that you think are important for your story, then this isn't an issue, but it's important to consider. How about offline access? We're so dependent on Wi-Fi, and you can find it almost anywhere. But I'll tell you, I was flying back from a conference last week, and I needed to do some work, and I had hoped that I could purchase Wi-Fi online because I was traveling for quite a few hours, and there was an issue on the plane. I had no control over it, but luckily I had set up online access, and I've got that for my photos and my documents. And so I was able to enjoy and view them. So you might be in an area out of town, you might be traveling. If you need offline access, it's important to know that's a feature. Price and storage tiers, of course, pricing is really important, but here I'm specifically talking about that pricing structure and storage tiers. Are you committed for a period of time? Are you able to downgrade or upgrade your package that you signed up for? Is that going to be important to you? So before you dive in, make sure that if you need to commit to something for a year, that you feel comfortable doing that. Integration, we talked about cross-platform compatibility, but this is referring more to editing software or social media platforms. So let's say you use Lightroom for facial recognition or some editing. Is that something that's important to integrate with your online storage? Maybe you own your own business, or you provide marketing, or you just really enjoy posting on social media. Is it important that your online storage has access and compatibility with those different companies? Customer support. Now, I know it's difficult to determine whether, how robust the support is until you become a client or a customer of an online storage. But read the reviews, ask people, make a couple of phone calls. It's difficult sometimes to get a hold of a live person, but maybe they have a chat feature. Maybe they have FAQs that are really robust and provide answers to your questions. When you're stuck and you're trying to find a photo, whether it's for business or personal, that can be really frustrating if you're running into an issue and you don't have anybody to help you. And data migration, if you currently are storing your photos using an online cloud storage and you're moving to another one, it'd be really nice to know that you can easily migrate from one online service to another. And oftentimes that's kind of an added bonus feature, but that can make your life a lot easier. So consider that if you are in fact migrating to a new service. Data retention. Understanding what the retention policy is really important. And that means, what if you're not active on the site for a while? What if you're not uploading things or syncing for whatever reason? You have a subscription and you decide to cancel the subscription, or for some reason, there's an issue with your credit card. What's going to happen to your photos? Many of you, or some of you might know that in March, Shutterfly, for example, got rid of all their shared sites. And many of our clients were a little panicked because the photos they had on the shared sites were going to disappear. And so it's really important to understand what's the policy and know that unfortunately those policies can change. So when you get those emails that there's a policy change, oftentimes we delete it and we say, oh, we don't have to worry about that. Take a few minutes to read about it because it could have a huge impact on the future of your photos. And lastly, for cloud storage, a feature that I recommend you look for is scalability. Is it going to grow with your needs? I talked about, if you've got grandkids or young children and your family's growing, or if you own a business and you anticipate that's going to scale tremendously, how much do you need this to grow? You don't want to start with an online storage and then realize it's not enough for you and you have to start all over again. So keep that in mind. All right, let's move on to the next strategy for future-proofing your photos. File naming conventions actually can be really handy. Establishing a consistent file naming convention for your collection can help you quickly locate specific images and maintain order. Oftentimes it's that chaos that paralyzes us with our photos. Many of our clients look at their print photos and look at their digital photos and just feel overwhelmed and have difficulty finding them. So doing something as simple as this file naming convention can make it feel like you've got a lot more control of your photos and are going to make it easier in the future for you and your generations ahead to enjoy them. So I want to share an example of our file naming convention. As long as you come up with something consistent, but here's a starting point for you. So we start with the year. Then we add the numerical month. And of course, the reason that we add the numerical month along with the name of the month is so that when you're looking at your photos and you're organizing them by name, obviously December alphabetically comes before January, but as we all know, it doesn't actually come before January. So by adding this numerical number at the beginning, now you're helping organize your collection and see the journey as it actually happened. We also put the date of the month if we have it. Any additional information? Was it a trip? Was it an event? This happens to be a birth. And then of course, we always recommend you put a sequence number at the end so that you can differentiate between each photo. You can't save a photo with the exact same name. And if you don't add a sequence number, your program is going to add one for you. And oftentimes that's going to be inconsistent. You've heard this before, keep your software updated, and that applies to your photos, videos as well. Regularly updating your photo management and editing software ensures compatibility. So every time Apple decides to update their operating system, a number of companies, of course, are frantically trying to update, and they're doing that for your benefit. And it's going to work a lot smoother if you're consistently keeping up with the updates. Now, I do recommend that you do a little research and educate yourself on what those updates are and make sure they're compatible. But that's where those redundant backups come in as well. And the last strategy that I recommend is what you're doing right now by simply listening to and participating in this webinar is educating yourself. Stay informed about the development in the digital community, particularly when it comes to preservation, photography, and make sure that you're adapting your solutions based on that education. So I wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of organizing your photos for those of you that are interested in jumping into getting your photos organized as part of that future-proofing process. Now, you might be asking yourself, isn't it enough if I digitize my print photos and my negatives and slides and maybe just back up my digital photos? And for the purpose of preservation, certainly, that is a step in the right direction. But when you're considering future-proofing your photos, you're not just ensuring these memories are protected. You want to make sure they're protected so they can be enjoyed by future generations and tell your story. That's the reason we take photos, so that we can revisit these stories. So preserving them and backing them up is great, but if nobody can find them, share them, or enjoy them, then your story is not being told. And I don't want you to lose that. It's difficult to understand the story when you've got duplicate photos, or they're dated incorrectly, named incorrectly. They lack identification, again, with the keywords, facial recognition, things like that, or they're cluttered with the receipts and the cat names. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can organize your own photos as part of future-proofing them. So really, we want to take your collection from this, and this is actually one of our clients' photos, and we do get photos in boxes just like this. Skipped ahead to this. You can see we've got everything stored in archival labeled boxes. We've got multiple external hard drives and an online site. So now this client has all the things that I've talked about: the redundancy, the backups, the digitizing. I'm going to give you a couple steps on how you can make that happen yourself. So our goal for our clients, and your goal for your collection, really should be to create a comprehensive and organized digital collection with your photos, your videos, and your memorabilia. We recommend that they're grouped by year. sorted chronologically, named consistently by date, and focused on the photos that tell your story. Sometimes people ask, well, why is it important to sort them chronologically? Can't I just separate them by person? For example, I am one of 4 children. And when I initially decided to organize my parents' photos, when I started this company, my mom had them organized by each of us. And that's great, except I'm the oldest. And as you move on to my siblings, there's very few photos of them by themselves, right? This is an ongoing issue that many of you probably have experienced when you're trying to organize your photos. When you organize them chronologically, first of all, you're organizing them in a way, the way that you lived your journey. Your journey was not lived by person or by event. It was lived chronologically. Then you add those keywords, that facial recognition. Now you've got the story told, but you can call out the ones that you want with some of that identifying information. So the first step is really to consolidate. Gather all those photos that are in albums and envelopes and bags and boxes, those on thumb drives, CDs, floppy disks, online storage. We want to consolidate it all into one location, because that's where we're going to start reviewing and determining how we want to move forward. That's how we're going to clean things up and start naming them. When you organize with one little bit at a time, it's difficult because you might be organizing, let's say, a photo album or a few photo albums from the 80s. And then you go in your attic after you've spent all this time going through and organizing those, and you find out, oh, there's another box, or looks like somebody already scanned some of these photos and put them on a DVD. So now we've got duplicate copies. So getting everything in one place really is step one. And it's not glamorous, but it really does provide that foundation. And if you don't get any further than this initially, at least you know where everything is. The next step I call classify, and this is really at the heart of everything we're doing. So this is reviewing your collection, organizing it chronologically, renaming it. This is actually a sneak peek. This is Denise, one of our photo managers, and she's actually taken photos out of a multitude of albums and boxes and envelopes and gotten them organized and digitized for this client. Renaming may include date, major holidays, milestone events such as births, graduations, baptisms, bar mitzvahs. It could be identifying professional school, professional sports photos, ancestral photos, and memorabilia. So here's an example of renaming. And on the left-hand side, you can see a photo, and this is of my parents, who are absolutely adorable. And you can see this file was named Oregon 2017. So now we've renamed it 2017 08 August 13th. So we've got the date with that consistent naming. We've identified the event, which is trip to Oregon, and added that sequence. So now when I go to find that photo, if I remember the date, I can look in 2017. If I remember it's Oregon, I can type that up and find that. I could simply type the word trip and find all the photos that are relevant. Now, the next step, of course, would be using keywords and facial recognition. So this is an example, of course, of using facial recognition to identify all the photos of my mom in this particular instance. And that way I can type the word trip and type my mom's name in and find all the photos of her. I could type in both my mom's name, Jane, and my dad's name, Dan, and find all the photos of the two of them together. It's very powerful to have these facial recognition and keywords. And with technology and with AI, we actually work with a company that helps us provide some of these keywords that'll help you identify your photos. And much of it is provided for you and with some assistance. So using those keywords in facial recognition, I really think are key. So you've consolidated your collection, which means you've brought it all into one place. you've renamed and organized it, or you've begun that process. Along with that classifying, it's important to clean up, and those are kind of interchangeable. So I mentioned earlier that it's important, sorry about that. It's important to remove photos that don't tell your story. So I just want to address that quickly. So you can see on the left side, this is a photo of me as a child with my mom. And so that's my story, is my childhood, and the photos in which I'm featured in. Down here is a photo of myself, my husband, and our 2 children. That's also part of my story. That's also part of my journey. So I want to, of course, keep those photos. But just because I'm featured, if I'm not featured in a photo, it doesn't mean I'm not going to keep it. There's more to my story. In the center here, you can see a photo of my dad when he was younger and grew up in New Jersey, and my mom and her sisters. I wasn't born then, but this is a part of my story and the story that I want to pass on to my children and eventually my grandchildren. Now, what about those photos that don't tell your story? For print photos, that might be these blank ones, overexposed photos, the photos where you accidentally took a picture of your shoe or the sky because we couldn't look at photos before we ran to the 1-hour photo development and got them developed, or developed them ourselves for the photographers out there. With digital photos, though, it has become quite a bit more cumbersome, and it's difficult to find the photos you're looking for when you've got all this chaos. So we've got a screenshot of the weather. We've got, here's a recipe, those cat memes, or you take a picture of a receipt or a permission slip for your child. Cleaning all those photos up that don't tell your story is going to give you control of your collection really fast. Now, sometimes we'll find photos that are damaged or have poor quality, but they tell a story. So this particular photo, you can see on the screen, it had mold on it. This was a photo that we digitized for a client who gave us permission to use it. It's got mold on it, and apparently her children decided to take some black marker and decorate her photo. Now, the reason this photo is so important to her is her family had a fire when she was younger, and this was the only photo she had from her childhood. And when we met and she learned that we could restore this photo, she was absolutely elated. So if you find a photo and you determine this is part of my story, but it's not a great quality, you can work with somebody to get that restored and enhanced. So they're not lost forever. So we've consolidated, we've renamed and organized, we've cleaned some things up. For your print photos and the print memorabilia, we need to get them digitized. That's just a fancy word for scan. That's really defined as the conversion of print photos or that print memorabilia, such as children's artwork, birth certificates, that kind of thing, into a digital format. Now, items that we often see that can be digitized are print photos, print memorabilia. That might be articles, newspaper articles that you or a family member was featured in, tickets from an event, children's artwork, of course, slides and film negatives, making it very difficult if you don't have a projector or a way to view these photos. They're just sitting in a box. And those memories not only need to be preserved, but we want to see them. So there's a few different options for equipment if you're doing this on your own or hiring somebody else. The 3 that I'll bring up are the high-speed scanners that allow you to feed photos through quite quickly, or documents. Flatbed scanners, which many of us have at home, sort of your traditional flatbed printer scanner, or a camera scanning setup. Now, when you're deciding which equipment you want to use yourself, or if you want to hire somebody and you want to learn a little bit more, obviously a higher resolution produces a sharper and more detailed digital image. So if you're using a traditional scanner, that's going to be measured in DPI. Some people will recommend that you use at least 300 DPI, and that can work. We recommend we don't do anything less than 600 DPI when we are using a traditional scanner. Now, Anything greater than that is typically not necessary for your everyday photos unless you plan on, blowing them up and using them as wallpaper, making a giant poster of them. There's also camera scanning, and that is actually measured in megapixels, which many of you camera aficionados and photographers understand. Another thing to consider when deciding which equipment to use is the size of the photos that you're trying to scan or the items you're trying to scan and the current state. So we've been given very large scrapbooks, very large pieces of art. Those need to use the camera scan. We had some love letters. One of our clients, her grandparents wrote during World War II, wrote love letters to each other. Those are so delicate. We don't want to feed those through a camera scan. And for us, a flatbed scan can be very time consuming. So we're going to use the camera scanning setup for that. So it's important to understand what your needs are based on your collection. Software and editing tools. If you're going to use certain equipment, are the software and editing tools easy to use? Are they available? Are they expensive? Are they updated? Are they going to help you accomplish what you need in regards to those that are compatible with the equipment that you have? And of course, determine your budget and try and find equipment that meets your requirements. This is why we often recommend that you do solicit the help of a professional photo organizer, because they've got the equipment and expertise. And some of the equipment can be very, very costly. So if that's something you want to invest in the future and spend the time doing it, but you might just invest in finding the right photo organizing company to do that for you. All right, the last part of the project is simply storage. And we talked a lot about that with cloud storage. So I'm just going to mention that we recommend that all your printed items and memorabilia are stored in archival boxes and ideally are labeled in a climate controlled space. I recognize that we don't all have plenty of room to store that, so we do the best we can, but that is why they're digitized. So heaven forbid something happens. We did have a client that stored their photos next to their water heater, which burst. Luckily, we had already digitized their photos and we were able to reprint the ones that were damaged. And so it was more of a headache than anything, but they didn't lose any of those precious memories. We also recommend that digital photos are stored in 3 locations. So that might include an external hard drive I was mentioning earlier, a cloud-based backup, and a user-friendly online photo site. So you can have multiple cloud backups. You might use one that is simply, I'm going to upload everything. It doesn't have a great user interface, but I know that if my external hard drive was damaged and something happened with that online photo site, that I could download all my photos again and get a copy. The online photo sites really provide that gateway to allow you to enjoy and view your photos and share them. And that's really what we want to do, right? We want to preserve them so they can be enjoyed. So I want to just kind of wrap up with one of my favorite quotes: preserve your memories, keep them well. What you forget, you can never retell. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. And here's my information. You can reach out to me with any questions.
Rachel, thank you so much. We're going to open it up for any questions. I want to start with a question here, Rachel.
Great. Yeah.
When updating, because I think you made an important point about staying with the times as the technology changes. So we've seen solid state drives replace the old spinning drives, but a lot of us, I still have some desktop ones, I have some portable ones, and when I go to pull information off of them, it's one time it works, the next time it doesn't. You start freaking out and you're like, wait, do I have it backed up? But even when, even if it's backed up, if you have a 2 terabyte drive and it crashes, it's a hassle to, go online and find the information. It's not the smoothest process. So my question being, how often, if you have drives, because mine just sit in bins, is this something that over time they're going to deteriorate in a sense of they may not be reliable over time. There's certain certain electronics and technological aspects that over time it's like, okay, well, if it's stored, it's fine. And then you try it and it doesn't
Right.
work after having it sit for 10 years. And then there's some stuff that could sit there for 4 decades and it'll still work
Right.
when you turn it on. So where do hard drives fall with that? How often should we be updating the actual tangible hard drive?
That's a great question, Derek. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because what I've noticed over time, and we've seen all kinds of technology come through the door, and it's the older technology, the 8mm film reels, that actually seem to last longer than like the VHS tapes and stuff. So apparently we were doing it well many decades ago. But so the lifespan, as I understand it, for an external drive, and what we recommend to our clients, is about 5 years. For those external hard drives. Obviously, as technology improves and the SSD drives, the solid state drives, they certainly may be able to last longer. But if you are using the drive regularly, so if you've got that plugged in and it's consistently backing up to like a Backblaze or CrashPlan or something, you're going to want to evaluate that more often. My rule of thumb is the second you start seeing any kind of a glitch, that's when I change it, because it's not worth losing those memories. I would say that it's what we typically recommend is, when you get a new drive, go ahead and document through a label or a Post-it note, document the date that you got that drive, and then set a calendar item for yourself or look at that. And I would say within about 3 to 5 years, it's a good rule of thumb to replace it. Probably closer to 5 if you've just got it in a fire safe or you've got it sitting in a bin. But there are manufacturer errors, and it has happened. I mean, it happened recently with a bunch of SSD drives you might be familiar with, and it was a big issue, and we had to go back and replace them. And I'm just going to keep company names out of it, but that's a scary thought, and that was nothing we could control. So just kind of keeping an eye on it and having those redundant backups is a really good idea.
Yeah, I own about 5 of those, and I've been
replacing. I know. And so it's just a good idea if you've got those multiple backups. And it really depends. For me, these memories are so incredibly precious. And I hate to kind of bring it to a dark place, but when you see people on the news that have experienced a loss from a hurricane or a fire or a flood, once they know that their family and their pets are safe, the first thing you hear them say, most of them, is, "But all my photos, they're irreplaceable." And one thing that I always share with people is, you can get insurance for your house and your jewelry and your art, but you can't insure your photo memories. It's because they're irreplaceable. So if you've got a number of different drives and then that online site, you should be okay.
All right. As I'm sitting over here and I'm like, man, 5 years.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's been, we tripled that. Yeah. I'm hanging on by a thread. I think like you said, when you get that first glitch, or I have some hard drives that sound like I'm warming my car up in the morning when they turn on, and it's probably not
back to the dial up. And the other thing that I didn't mention, and I probably should have, but since you asked, Derek, is it's really a good rule of thumb to keep about 30% of your of space on your external drive. And so oftentimes we find clients will bring us external drives and they say, "Oh my goodness, I can't turn it on, it won't mount, I can't see anything." And often that just simply has to do with the fact that it does need some space to process. So our rule of thumb is to keep it at a max of 70%, right? So if you've got 1 terabyte, you only want to use up about 700 gigs of space. So allowing 30 to 40%, I know that means you have to buy a bigger drive and everything, but it's going to work so much faster if you retain that policy.
I am the poster child for doing everything wrong, I guess.
Oh no.
I feel like if you keep talking, it'll just keep exposing more of my weaknesses in storage.
Okay, well,
so that one, no, that's a great, because I've never heard that before. We do a lot of content, and you think, how many people do we hear talk about storage? That never comes up. I mean,
really, I'm so surprised.
Yeah, and most people are. I'm guessing there's a lot of people out there like me who it's okay. You push it right until you get that message that pops up and says, and the only space you leave is because you were trying to transfer 50 gigs and you only had 45 gigs. So it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to transfer whatever I had left.
Right. Well, and that's where, the whole data corruption can come in, because now you're trying to transfer data because this drive is so full and the drive doesn't have enough space to, it's kind of like, I would compare it, we have to eat, right? And we need that fuel for energy. And if we're not, if we don't have room to, I guess, eat that food, I should really come up with a better example. That was not a good example, but you get the concept, right?
Yeah.
So having that room, and then as you're trying to transfer photos to that online site, there could be data corruption because now the drive is having to work extra hard. So you're really setting yourself up for failure. So we'll talk, and I'll get you set up.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
Rachel, I want to thank you. This was a ton of great information as always.
Good.
And there's never too much because it's constantly changing, and there's a lot of bad information out there. And even with the good information, there's so much of it, and it's in so many places. Sometimes you don't know what's best practices for your particular situation. So I'm glad we can get some good information into the hands of the people who need it. I know our audience needs it. We all know
Good.
I need it, as I've already exposed. I've lost 5 terabytes of data.
Wow.
And it was in my, before, when you're young and you don't think that technology, you think it's going to last forever. You don't think it's going to crash, but within 6 months. And one of the drives was brand new. I had it about a month or two. So people, it doesn't matter how long you've had it.
No.
It doesn't matter anything.
Yeah.
There's really no, you have, I'm going to put quotes around this, reputable brands. There's a lot of reputable brands, but even the best made stuff is subject to failure at some point. So
it's true, and unfortunately, the pandemic, it put a lot of things behind, that we were behind on on chips. And so now everything's happening so fast that there's room for error, unfortunately. And so it's really just doing your due diligence and determining, and I tell, clients, and I would tell your audience too, that it's a lot of information and it can feel overwhelming. And if you want to do it on your own, of course, I'm going to recommend that you hire an expert. And there are many of us all over the country. But if you're going to do it on your own, just take that first step and just start protecting them. It doesn't all have to happen overnight. So just start by, replacing your drives and using up only 70%, and just take a couple steps.
Wonderful advice. Thank you again, Rachel. I'm going to spend the rest of the day on Backblaze. Thanks to Rachel. So now that you've scared the living daylights out of me, I'm going to use this as my reality check for the day. But
Sounds
Rachel,
good.
I want to thank you, and the entire Photo Managers team has been great with us this month. We did drop the links there for the Photo Managers Save Your Photos month, and we'll have them back in January. So Rachel dropped her information. If you guys do have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to Rachel and check out what she's doing as well over there at 2000 Paces. But Rachel, a huge thank you to you and everybody else who made this production possible. That's it. Another round of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.